He does not suffer fools. You have to really know what you're doing when you present to him.
Well, let's talk about that for just a second, because I'm really curious what it's like working and collaborating with Michael Mann on a project. How does he approach locations? What kind of direction does he give you when he's sending you out to do?
I'll give you the best answer I can, which is I worked on that movie scouting for over a year, because even once they started shooting, he was so concerned about the scene where Pacino and De Niro meet, because it was the first time they were going to be on film together.
Sure.
And it's ironic because the way it's shot, you can't really even tell that that's the case. But so it was at a restaurant. So I literally shot every restaurant, and then I started to think out of the box, and it was like, maybe it's some sort of a food truck, or maybe they're downtown and there's like, a bunch of bums around a can with a fire in it and someone's cooking something. So, I would anything I could possibly think of, And he, I remember bringing back some pictures, and he wore these little half-rimmed glasses, and he'd look over his glasses at me finally, and he'd say, "This one's good." And then he'd look and he'd say, "Now go find me something better." And you would, you'd been looking for months, it was just like, oh, and half of you just wants to scream, "What?" And then, you have to get a Zen attitude towards your job, and you just realize.
Locations, go to 2.
Lori on 2. This is Lori Balton. Hi, I'm a location scout, and I'm here with Dodd Vickers on Locations on 2.
This is Dodd Vickers, your host for Locations on 2, the podcast taking you behind the scenes on set with location professionals working in the film industry around the world. Locations on 2 is brought to you by the Location Managers Guild International. The LMGI is a global organization of location professionals in the film, television, and commercial industry. Find out more by visiting them online at locationmanagers.org. On this episode, we talk to the first location professional ever inducted into the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, Lori Balton. Lori's worked on so many projects, there's too many to name here. So let's just jump on over to the back channel where the real work gets done on set for a chat with Lori. Locations is on 2. Well, I can only think of one way to start this conversation, Lori, and that's to ask the question, how did you, as someone growing up in New York, over the family funeral home, find their way into the film industry and become one of the better-known location professionals out there today?
I don't know. So I have 4 brothers, and ironically, they all work in some capacity of the film industry, and it just sort of happened. And, my mom was a housewife, and my dad was a funeral director. I don't know how it happened.
Did you grow up in the Bronx or in Brooklyn? I can't recall.
Brooklyn. Brooklyn.
And growing up, did you help in any way with the family business, or was that something totally separate?
Oh, no. When we used to play hide and seek around, everything. And then when he had a job, he'd give us a ride to school in the hearse. So we went to the Immaculate Conception School around the corner, and the hearse would pull in, and he'd open the back, and 4 Baltons would jump out of it, and off we'd go.
Well, so growing up, did you have any exposure to the film and television industry at all? Did you see filming around New York, or, did you have an interest or burning desire to get?
No, never, nothing. Okay.
Well, that's one of the funny things to me is how somebody who really has no exposure to the business, nobody they know is in the business. Maybe they like movies and television shows, but some suddenly find themselves really pushed in this direction.
Well, this is what I love too, very similar to what you do when I do the career focus section in the Compass magazine. And that's what I love, is that we all seem to have some basic similarities in our temperament. I would say curiosity being the overriding factor. And very few of us, grew up knowing we wanted to be in the film industry, or having any awareness of the film industry.
Yeah,
so it's interesting, the varied background we come from. I ended up getting I took the SATs because my friends were taking the SATs. So I basically took them on a dare. I remember being very hungover when I took the SATs. And for some reason, I ended up getting a full scholarship to Cornell. I don't know quite how it happened. I wasn't planning on going to college, but I was like, I went up to look at the campus, and I thought, well, you're going to pay me to be here for 4 years, that's cool. I'll do it.
Okay.
And so I went and thoroughly enjoyed it. It was 4 really happy years. And then from there, my boyfriend was in a band and was moving to Boston. So I moved to Boston, and I didn't know what else to do. So I worked at Boston University during the day and got my master's degree at night. And then just kind of fell into, working in, both degrees were in communication. At Cornell, it was in the ag school, which my brothers thought was hysterical. They all gave me, bandanas and overalls when I left
typical
school.
brothers, I'm sure.
I finished my master's degree, and I started working on a cable news station for the Rob Report. I started as a PA.
Oh, I totally remember the Rob Report, yeah. Oh,
God, it was horrible. And then the next one, they do stories like fur coats for Cabbage Patch dolls.
That sounds right, yeah.
So I started as a PA, then I was an associate producer, and then the next one I produced, simply because nobody else was there to do it. So it was a great experience. And, from there I went into working predominantly on industrials, which was the big market in Boston at the time. And I would work on features whenever they came to town, and I loved them. Mm-hmm. And then I met my husband on a movie and ended up moving to LA.
Oh, what film did you meet your husband on?
Well, I met my husband on a horrible movie called Second Sight, which was about a psychic detective agency with Bronson Pinchot and John Larroquette.
Well, that's a title I'm not familiar with whatsoever. I don't remember
There's no reason why you should. It was truly awful. But I had worked on Witches of Eastwick, and I was the assistant to the production manager. And when the movie ended, he said, if you ever move to LA, please get in touch. So when I moved to LA, you're never sure whether people really mean things like that, or they really want you to get in touch. And so I went to see him and handed him my resume, just thinking that he would, comment on my resume and say, this may work in Boston, but it's not how we do things in L.A. And instead, he took my resume and he handed me a deal memo, and he marched me down the hall and introduced me to Janice Pauly and said, here's your new assistant.
Oh, wow.
It was kind of crazy.
Yeah, Janice Pauly most recently did Tenet, another great film we're looking for. What project were you working with her on?
That was another great movie, a Stallone movie called Lockup.
Okay, I didn't see that, but I do remember the title, I think. It seems like I recall it.
Again, absolutely no reason why you should remember it. And Janice, is very... nobody really tells Janice this is your new assistant. So she was... she'd say, I want you to go here, I want you to do this, I want you to go here. And I was like writing things down frantically. And then I'd get on the phone to my husband and I'd say, where's this, where's that, where's Malibu? So I had my Thomas guide and I figured everything out. And, to this day, Janice and I are very good friends. She's my daughter's godmother. Oh. We haven't killed each other yet. So it all worked out.
So at that point, you were obviously more focused on the management side and dealing with the logistics. And the other flip side, you're best known as a scout now. And that's the flip side of the traditional management that most people think we do. How did that transition come about? When did you make the transition from the logistics and management and the things you were learning early on projects with Janice and others to getting into the scouting and collaborating with the creative team on projects? Where did that start?
Well, I find that it's an interesting job in that it's both right brain and left brain, location managing. And I think that there are very few people, there are some, but there are very few people who really excel in both. Mm-hmm. And I personally prefer the creative, but the way it came about was simply because of my daughter. I was pregnant and I wanted to spend time with her. So I realized the first movie that I had to turn down when I was pregnant was Alan Pakula's Pelican Brief. And it was like, great. Now that I finally worked to get to this level, I'm going to have to take 20 steps back. But that was fine. It was my decision. And I knew that I would probably have to, readjust everything. So I decided to tell people I just scouted because even though the hours were still long, they were my own. And I could, take time to have a teacher conference or whatever I needed to do with my kids. So I thought I'd have a lot less watch. And actually, the reverse happened. I had a lot more work. I think people thought, oh, she must be pretty good if she's got all of these restrictions on what she does or doesn't do. And because all I did was scout LA every day, I got to know LA like the back of my hand. Mm-hmm. So it was, it ended up working out really well for me. I think I was the first person who only scouted on features. Mm. There were people who did that on commercials, but not on features. And now today, I think there are a couple of people who do that.
I'm trying to remember. I think, tell me if I'm wrong, but I think the last thing I recall that you managed was Heat. Is that right?
I do still manage on occasion, but it's mostly when there's an emergency situation. And I think all of the years that I worked as a manager make me a much better scout. Mm-hmm. But yes, Heat was the last movie that I worked on as a location manager. And even on Heat, I mostly scouted. But,
Gotcha.
you know, as you can imagine with Michael Mann, there were a lot of emergencies. So I kept getting pulled in to, you know, help out a little bit here and there with the managing.
So Heat, we recently talked to Mike Fantasia, who that was a project he was involved with early in his career, so he wasn't involved in a lot of the big sets that's so well known for. And I also had an interview with John Panzarella, who did L.A. Confidential. I can't think of two more iconic Los Angeles films, at least films that kind of capture the essence and the style of Los Angeles than Heat and L.A. Confidential. Talk a little bit about your scouting process.
Yeah, it was one of the reviews in the L.A. Times referred to it as a love letter to Los Angeles, and I just love that. It was really great to see all of our work up on the screen, to the point where we'd find great locations, and Michael rewrote some of the script to accommodate the locations because he loved them so much. So it was a good. It was grueling and it was horrible in many ways. But I really think that Michael Mann is a big part of the reason that I'm as good of a scout as I am, because he does not suffer fools. You know, you have to really know what you're doing when you present to him.
Well, let's talk about that for just a second, because I'm really curious what it's like working and collaborating with Michael Mann on a project. How does he approach locations? What kind of direction does he give you when he's sending you out to do?
I'll give you the best answer I can, which is I worked on that movie scouting for over a year, because even once they started shooting, he was so concerned about the scene where Pacino and De Niro meet, because it was the first time they were going to be on film together. And it's ironic because the way it's shot, you can't really even tell that that's the case.
Right.
But so it was at a restaurant. So I literally shot every restaurant, and then I started to think out of the box, and it was like, you know, maybe it's some sort of a food truck, or maybe they're downtown and there's like, you know, a bunch of bums around a can with a fire in it and someone's cooking something. So, I mean, I would anything I could possibly think of, you know. And I remember bringing back some pictures, and he wore these little half-rimmed glasses, and he'd look over his glasses at me finally, and he'd say, "This one's good." And then he'd look and he'd say, "Now go find me something better." And you would, like, you'd been looking for months, you know? I mean, it was just like, oh, and half of you just wants to scream, "What?" And then, you know, you have to get a Zen attitude towards your job, and you just realize, okay, they're paying me every day, calm down and go try to find something better. And that was it. I mean, that's my whole, I'll tell people all the time, I'm happy to look until the cows come home. I mean, I love my job, and I never know where there's going to be, you know, some little thing that I'd missed in the past because I never had enough time to fully explore it. So I'll take as much time as you want to give me, but there does come a point where I'll say to people, I really don't think it's there unless, you know, you want me to go out and build it. So it's, you know, it's your decision, but I think I've done everything I can. But, you know, usually there's always another place to look or another way to spin it. So I'm happy to keep looking.
You mentioned a couple of locations that you brought to the table that they modified the script to accommodate them. They liked them so much. And I just would love to hear a little bit more about those. Was there one
I think the house that was it John Voight was in with all of the crazy antennas and everything.
Oh, sure. Yeah,
I think that was something that was a wonderful thing that Michael never expected us to find. You know, so he sort of made his character be a little bit more towards the kind of person who would live in that kind of a place, you know, because it was just a little bit more interesting than what he had asked us to find. The other thing that was so funny with Michael is he really he likes going into dangerous places because he feels that it comes it comes through visually into the film. And I always joke that I should have a piece of razor wire that I can affix to the front of my lens so that it was always slightly out of focus in the bottom of the frame so that he would think I was in some rough neighborhood. And meanwhile, I could shoot a graffitied wall in Santa Monica, and tell him that I was somewhere, who knows where.
Right.
But because of Michael and because he wants you to really push and push and push, both Janice and I were trained by him to know that we never take no for an answer, and we'd never stop anything at what the average place to stop would be. We go 10 times further, go to it, just because he wants to make sure he sees everything that's there, and he sees everything beyond what the normal person would show him. And it's a challenge, it's frustrating, but he really, I think he helped me establish a very good foundation for what it is that I do and how effective I am.
Right. Speaking of the restaurant for Pacino and De Niro in that movie, which restaurant did you select, and how early in the process had you actually shown him that restaurant before it was chosen?
Oh, my God. I did show him it earlier. He ended up at Kate Mantelini's. He decided, and this is where the brilliance of Janice Pauly comes in, he decided on a Friday night, I want to say, that he wanted to shoot it Monday. And it's in Beverly Hills. And their permit procedure is not an easy permit procedure. And Benita Miller was the permit person then, and she really, really rose to the occasion and helped make it happen. So he got his location. But between Benita and Janice, man, I don't know how they did it. And those are the times that I love to I just scout. I'm happy to help you if you need the help, but I'm just scouting.
Yeah, I've had that happen before where you've got a location, it's exactly what they want, but for some reason they're not seeing it. And I'll send a different scout to shoot it so that different set of eyes brings it to the table for rediscussion.
A lot of times they don't know what they're looking for. And I always say that scouting locations is as much a process of elimination as it is one of discovery. And you really have to blow away all of the detritus so that they can really see what's there. And maybe, they saw something at the beginning that they didn't think was that great, but then once they see how everything else compares to it, suddenly it does come back into play. And that's one thing that I'm not afraid of, is to reintroduce locations to people, which can be hard when you're working with someone like Michael Bay or Michael Mann, because they will point out, I've had one of them rip up a location and say, you showed me this before, I don't want to see it again. And they'll pick up the pieces and go, no, actually, look at this. You do want to see it again, and let me tell you why, and have them then reconsider it. But it's not easy sometimes to bring old things back that they've rejected because they think that they rejected it for the right reasons, and they maybe did or maybe didn't.
This might be a good episode since you're better known as a scout, and that's where you spend most of your time these days, for you to talk a little bit about your process. So when you're brought onto a project, quite often you don't have a script. You kind of have an idea. Maybe they've given you a general idea of the key locations you have. So just when you're brought onto a project, what's your process? How do you start looking? What's the conversation and questions you ask to get started, to get out into the world and start finding the things you think that they're going to need?
I don't think that there really is a process. I think that it varies with each movie, and with some movies you have to go on the locations. With other movies, it's a script, or if you don't have a script yet, it's a story that's very evocative, so you just go with the feeling. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've worked on things, mostly with Michael Bay, where there's no third act that's written. And they just say, go find us some great locations that we could drape the third act around. And you feel like saying, how much does the writer make and how much do I make? Because I'm now doing their work, aren't I?
Right.
On the one hand. On the other hand, it's a great challenge, and it's really a great honor to have someone trust you enough to have you go out there and find the third act of their movie. So I don't think that there's any set answer for that. It's just all of the crap that I carry around with me in my head, trying to, think about, where was that location was that in LA or was that in Atlanta? It's that sort of thing. and then just going through my hard drives and looking at images and having things, you look at one thing and it may not be right, but it makes you remember 7 other things, and go off and explore them and sit with the designer and show them some ideas and have them sort of narrow it down this way or that, and then off you go.
Who do you collaborate most with these days, or does it vary? Is it the production designer or the director that you're talking to the most in the early stages?
Again, it varies. Sometimes I'm hired on projects where there's just a producer, where there's no director yet, let alone a production designer. And they're trying to figure out, with the incentive. That's the other thing is when the incentives entered the picture, that kind of took away a whole chunk of creativity, because now you were talking with the producers about what areas had incentives that could come even remotely close to giving you any sort of feel that they wanted in the script. So it depends upon what I'm doing. A lot of times, too, I'll be called in by a location manager who's already shooting, who lost a location.
Right.
And they need me to find something in a hurry. And everybody else is already, up to their ass in alligators with what they're shooting. So I just work with the location manager to tell me what they had and what they liked about it and what else could I find.
Right.
So it's any combination of that.
Right. Thinking of Nancy Haker, who we talked to on another interview, she really gets interested in projects when it's, big landscapes. Her background in Alaska and hiking and the things she's interested in, those are the projects that she gets excited about. You've got a pretty diverse portfolio of projects, but I'm curious, if you get a script and it's a certain type of project, do you get excited? What projects get you really excited about scouting these days?
Well, the reason that I stayed mostly in LA was because I was raising my daughter. So by the time she was a senior in high school, that's when the incentives kicked in, and that's when I sort of started traveling more. I love scouting the big outdoors locations. I also get very excited about urban locations. I like doing everything. I'm curious by nature, I think. So I enjoy seeing the world. I enjoy, for instance, on Jungle Cruise, I scouted the Amazon. It was incredible.
Yeah, sure.
And the other thing that I remember is on Memoirs of a Geisha, scouting a river in Napa, we were, going down the river at dawn with like a fog rising off the river. It was just magical. And there are all of these moments that I'm so grateful to have where I pinch myself and go, okay, not only am I here, but somebody's paying me to be here.
Yeah.
It's an incredible job. I'm very lucky.
Sure. When I was joking with James Lynn. James Lynn was talking about being out with his son and then seeing something off over on the horizon and going to investigate it on his own time and finding a location that eventually turned into a key location for one of the Captain America films. And, I've had that happen. I get out in the car with my wife and we're on the way to a family event or something, and I make a left turn that she knows is not associated with where we're going to be going in any way. And she looks at me and says, I guess we're scouting now. Is that what's happening here? I'm always curious what's down this path or what's going on over there.
Exactly. I can't just drive. I'm a swivel head. I'm like always looking.
Absolutely. Have you had a location that you brought to the table that you found that way, that you were just out on your own time and stumbled across something you knew was perfect for what you were out looking for?
Nothing comes to mind, really. Other than what I would say is the bear went over the mountain syndrome. I remember scouting on a river runs through it. So this was very early on in my career, and realizing, well, I got to go around that curve. And you go around the curve in the road and there's a hill, and it's like, oh, well, I've got to go up the hill. I've got to see what's on the other side. Because the last thing I want is Redford to be out there, right, driving around, and he goes 2 inches farther than I went, and there's the perfect fucking location. And he's like, why didn't you find this for me? So I do have that compulsion that constantly drives my scouting. It's the whole bear went over the mountain. It's like, what else is over there? I better check it out. And I remember, with Ginny Noppelwall, who's a production designer I love working with, It's like, when you're scouting interiors, you're like, where does this door go to? Well, where does this hallway go to? Well, where does this door go to?
Yeah, exactly.
And you really do have to open every door and look in every nook and cranny and know that space inside and out before
Absolutely.
you present it.
Yeah, no, I think most scouts, especially when they're starting out, have had that happen at one time or another. You fail to open the door or look around the corner, and they do it on the tech scout and find something that's perfect that you hadn't shown them. Or on the reverse, they find something that makes it not work, kills the location.
Right.
So
exactly.
It's
exactly.
Yeah. I meant to ask when we were talking about the third act and not having the third act and being sent out to find something to finish the third act. I think it was Michael Bay you mentioned working on one of his projects where they needed something for a third act and you brought them a location. Can you illustrate that a little more? Can you talk about that a bit as far as,
it's whatever, it's whatever mayhem, or in his case, bayhem, that the actors are up to, and, the hijinks and the car chases and the da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And then all of a sudden there's a pause because they don't really know how they're going to end the movie. So it can be something as simple as, I found this power plant that's got, 5 levels and it's open. And if you used harnesses, you could swing them down. And it's like, oh, okay, great. And it's nothing really to do with the story, but there really hasn't been much of a story all along anyway. So it's just some visual,
right.
Some great visual that they could drape the end of the movie over. And everyone would go, wow, that scene was breathtaking. And meanwhile, what was the story? Well, it was kind of a run-of-the-mill story, but boy, yeah, that location and that scene sure were breathtaking. Mm-hmm. So it's that kind of thing.
Lori, what is it about this job that makes you love it so much? I mean, you obviously have invested your life into this to the point where you've created, or were one of the founding members of the Location Managers Guild, and trying to get better representation for location managers, more recognition for the job. Some people think of it only as the logistics, and that's fine. There's also the creative aspect of it, and that's great as well. But it's the whole package. It's the team that is put together to really give productions a place to go to work every day, and it wasn't recognized enough. What is it about this job that compelled you to make it your life?
I think that it's very important that we get recognition as being a creative part of the team. And I think very few people, even people in the industry, but very few people in general understand what a location scout does and how a location scout contributes. And, you'll read all of these articles where the production designer and director are talking about the locations that they found, and there's never any mention of the location person.
Right.
So to me, it's kind of important that we give credit where credit is due. So that's one thing. And I don't know, I've always loved photography. My brothers had a dark room when I was little, so I picked it up at a young age. And I love seeing things in a different way. I love framing images. I love experiencing different places and different cultures. I mean, I'm who knows what's going to happen with COVID now, but, this is one thing I'm so grateful that in recent years I've gotten to see so much of the world, and go scout in Vietnam and scout in Hong Kong, and and the Amazon. I mean, it's really been enormous fun, and I really, really enjoy it.
I alluded to this in the intro I recorded before the show, and I believe it was 2013. You were the first location professional inducted into the Academy. Is that right?
That is correct.
How did that come about? What brought it on? How did the Academy suddenly come to recognize the role of locations people and induct you into the Academy that year? The Location Managers Guild was desperately trying to get into the Television Academy. Mm-hmm. And at the time I wasn't. Now I do quite a bit of scouting for TV, but at the time I was not at all. And I thought, well, you know what? Let me go knock on the door of the Academy and see what they say. And I talked to my friend Bo Welsh and John Meyer, and both of them agreed that I should be there. And they helped me. And I thought I'd put in the application, and I keep applying every year, and maybe after 10 years they'd take pity on me and let me in. And really no one was more surprised than that I got in the first try. And
it was great. And I think that we belong there. And now we have a number of location managers in the Academy. And I think I'm hoping we have better luck now with the Television Academy.
Absolutely. Why do you think that's so important? Just talk a little bit about why you feel it's so important for us to be better represented in these two academies.
Because it's recognition, because it shows that people in the industry understand how we contribute creatively and what the value of our work is. And everybody wants to feel valued because of what they can do and what they can contribute.
Yeah, I think half the crew still doesn't understand exactly what the role of the location manager is and how extensive and broad and deep reaching into the project the work that we do is. And I was watching the Academy Awards not too long ago, and I hear a director thanking his assistant director for closing a road. And I'm like,
that would be Damien Chazelle.
Well, I wasn't going to mention the production or which show it was or who said that, but it had nothing to do with his AD. It was all about the location manager, and that's what got me.
Yeah, and Robert Falks really did an incredible job on that film. He worked his butt off, and to have the credit for what he did go to the AD in the Oscars, that was just crazy. So it's those kind of things that we would like to, that we're working, the LMGI, we're working towards preventing those kind of misunderstandings, shall we say.
Yeah, I was sitting with my wife watching the Academy Awards, and obviously she understands the job. She's done some scouting and worked with me on projects and knows all of the people I know here that do the same thing, so she gets it. And when he said that and thanked his AD for closing down the interstate on La La Land, we both just looked at each other and shook our heads. And we're like, really? Yeah, that's who he's going to take this opportunity to thank?
But, that was the reason for starting up the LMGI, was that we realized that we always joke that we were the redheaded stepchild in the Teamsters Union here, because nobody really understands what we do or what our value is. So that was the point of the guild, was to basically be our own PR person, because nobody else was going to do it.
Right.
So I often have the problem with people being, we want to say, oh, you did this or you did that, and they get very modest and they don't want to make a big deal out of it. And I'll always say, look, it's not about you and your whether you're modest or not, because when you look good, you make all of us look good. And what you've done is an accomplishment. So we want to call it to the attention of everybody, because we all rise up with you when we can say, look at what so-and-so did and how great it was.
Well, and obviously it's one of the reasons I wanted to do these interviews, is to share some of the great stories of the things we've done, some of the people working in the production, and help people understand the complex role of location management in a film production of any size. And it's been really, really great to hear the stories myself and to get to know the people better. But, we're the diplomatic corps as well. On top of it all, we're the face of the production to the public. People may know who the director is and who the cinematographer is and who the actors are. Yeah. But when it comes right down to it, we're the people they deal with on a day in, day out basis. And yet the crew half the time just thinks we're responsible for the parking and where we eat dinner and all that. And they don't understand the role of locations at all overall.
No, it's very true. And even some location managers, when we work on the awards show, there are some people who think, well, actually, the COLA Awards, which is the COLA's California On Location Awards.
Right.
God love them. They're the first award show, the first group that ever thought to recognize the work of location people. Mm-hmm. Unlike our awards, it's much more towards the logistics, like, so-and-so closed a 4-lane highway with the help of, so-and-so in the California Film Office, that sort of thing. But they had a part of their award show a couple of years ago was the Location Manager Olympics, and they had all of these activities with traffic cones and police tape and porta potties, and I was just sitting there thinking, oh, this is exactly the image I don't like about what it is that we do, because we really do so much more.
Absolutely, yeah.
And granted, it is a big element of it, but even location managers, going back to what I said about them being generally a very humble group, they don't want to, they don't brag about the fact that they did this or they did that, but really they are much more important than moving around traffic cones and police tape. So I think that's the message that the LMGI is trying to get out there.
Right. One of the questions I ask everybody that I talk to, and I think it was because of something either I talked to you about or read about you, what location did you bring to the table on a production that was exactly the opposite of what you were asked to find? They want you to find a black house of a certain style, and you bring back a white house of the totally opposite style, and they fall in love with it, and it suddenly becomes a major feature in the production.
It was me, exactly. It was me, and it was Michael Bay, and I used the story about black and white because to save my life, I can't remember what it was. Okay. But whatever it was, I was looking for it for months. And it had to be black, 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 black. It had to be black, black, black. And finally I brought him something white, whatever, the complete opposite of what he was asking. And he looked at the pictures and he said, "This is exactly what I asked you to find. Why did it take you so fucking long?" And I just looked at him and I said, "No, it is the direct opposite of what you asked me to find. And I wasn't even going to put it in front of you. And I'm just so frustrated because to me, this feels like it should be right."
Right.
And there it was, and he liked it. So that goes back to what I said earlier about so many times they don't even know what they're asking you for because they don't know what's out there. So they may be asking for something black when it's really going to end up being something white. And I think you need to do it for a while and feel confident enough in your own shoes that you don't, that you feel like you're collaborating with the director and not that you just, work for the production designer.
Right, right.
But that you have a voice and that your voice counts, And you have to be willing to say it because there are going to be plenty of times when people just tell you, "Shut up, you don't know what you're talking about." And you'll realize you don't. But there are some times where you'll fight that because you do realize that you're bringing, a different way of looking at things that may actually add to the production.
Right. I know that you've talked about having a number of locations. You always have several in your quiver that will work for different things, even though you're looking for something fresh and new. But is there one that still hasn't been used, one that is perfect for production, but nobody's picked it yet?
Oh, that's really a hard question in L.A. because almost everything has been shot in L.A.
Sure.
For something or other. And I can't think of an immediate location, but occasionally you'll see something. Mm-hmm. Well, I can tell you one that I love is the interior of the Olvera house in downtown LA. Mm-hmm. And they shot it on Live by Night, and they did such a beautiful job using that location that I was proud of them for doing such a good job and showing the location in such a great light. But I was, also regretting the fact that I love that location so much, and I would have liked it to have been in the movie that I worked on, because it's just such a great spot. It's just this old brick courtyard that's evocative of, New Orleans or just somewhere else. It certainly doesn't feel like it's Los Angeles. And it really looks beautiful in the movie. They did a great job on it.
And I think it was you that talked about letting the location talk to you. You go into it ready to shoot it, thinking it's exactly what you need, but you've got to kind of take a second and get your head around it before you start shooting so you can shoot it properly. So it really evokes what you're trying to say about the location and why you think it's worth showing to the director and the production designer for the project.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is why I'm cringing when I'm hearing people say, "Oh yeah, because of COVID, we're going to have to get 360 cameras and just show them a panorama." And it's like, It doesn't make any sense to me because that's part of the reason I think people hire me is because I just don't stand in the middle of a location and shoot it and then turn around and shoot the other reverse angle like I did when I first started working.
Right.
I read the script and I shoot it for the script. I lay down on the ground, I go up on a rooftop, I do whatever I need to do to give the director the most compelling location picture so that they could see how they might be able to use the location to tell their story. So it's not, you have to kind of breathe some life into it. You're not just documenting it. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. And I think it was Leanne and I were talking about this and saying, there's a lot of locations out there will work the minute you look at the description or what's being asked for and the conversations you have with them. But you've got to go out and shoot it in a different way. You can't just shoot it the same way you've shot it before. You're trying to present it in such a light that they understand why you're showing it to them, even though they thought it wasn't what they wanted because they've seen it. Maybe it was in the latest Marvel movie and they don't, oh, no, that's not what we're looking for. But that was shot in a different way than what you think.
Exactly. And that's funny that you say that, because I was just about to mention that that's the other side of it, is people saying, oh, I've seen that in a million movies. And it's like, yeah, but you've never seen it shot like this. And again, it's the same thing of having the confidence to not just listen to someone say, no, that doesn't work, to say, to go out and reshoot it and reintroduce it and not tell them necessarily what it is and have them say, oh, what's that? And it's like, oh, that's the thing that you told me wasn't going to work. But I just kind of had a feeling that maybe if I shot it from this angle, you might be a little bit more interested in it.
Do you have a favorite project that you've worked on when you go back and you think about everything you've worked on over the course of your career so far, and you think about the collaboration and the things that went into pulling it off and getting it on the screen, and then the results once you see it on the screen? Is there one project that jumps out at you?
I would say Heat, because we just worked so hard on that, and we saw all our work up on the screen, and it was just such a learning experience. I also loved working on Seabiscuit because my daughter is a horse trainer, and she started riding horses at a very early age. And she came and scouted with me on her spring break. She was in fourth grade. And we scouted the state of California. I was scouting fairgrounds and stuff. And it was just so great to be able to have her go out and see the world with me. And Seabiscuit was just wonderful because it was such a great story. Everybody wanted a part of it. They rolled out a red carpet everywhere I went. People were so excited about that movie and the idea of working on it. So that was pretty great. And then Jungle Cruise. Who gets to go and spend months in the Amazon? I mean, who does that?
Right.
It was. And take pictures, it was just incredible. The images that I got while I was down there, they were just great. And I love when I scout, I don't just take shots of, the panoramic locations. I take a lot of detail shots also. Lemony Snicket, when I scouted on that, it was all of the texture that I found, like, textures from the Salton Sea and textures from closed mill towns in Lawrence, Massachusetts, and all of this stuff that was drawn into the sets. It was pretty amazing to see. So even though there weren't any locations, I do feel that I contributed to the look of that movie, and in a pretty important sense.
Yeah. No, I was talking to somebody else, and they mentioned a doorknob. Like they while they were scouting, there was something about a doorknob they saw that made them feel compelled to shoot it and include it in the files when they submitted them for consideration to the production designer and the director. And it was the doorknob that ended up selling the location. And I've done something kind of like that with windows at times, like staircases and stained glass. And
the thing is, sometimes you're not so much selling an image, you're selling a mood. So you need, anything that helps you be evocative to get that mood across. That's what's going to work sometimes, as opposed to selling a physical location.
Yeah.
So, I completely agree 100%. And that happens more often than not, I think. And that's why you really need to go out and scout for a particular project and not rely on, 360 images because of COVID, or, just pulling images from a file, or working with a location service and using their images. You have to, because they're going to try to be standard to be all things to all people. And that's the last thing you want when you're scouting for a particular project. You don't want to be neutral. You want to get down in the dirt, and you want to present it for what the director's going to use it for. Right.
And I've had to explain that to people who have sent me files that they feel are representative of a location they think is perfect for what I'm looking for. And I'm like, great, I'll when can I go shoot it, or when can I send someone to shoot it?
Yeah, always.
And they don't understand why.
Yeah,
and I'm trying to help them understand that, those are great as far as telling me what's there and documenting the location. But I've been involved in the conversations with the director and the production designer and whatnot, and I know what they are looking for and how they're planning to shoot it. So I need to try and capture that. I think you've talked too about your love of shooting and working with the plate unit. I'd like you to kind of talk a little bit about that and why.
Nothing would make me happier, yes. Nothing would make me happier than to be the plate shot queen. The thing that's great about it is you have such a small footprint. So on Lion King, we went to shoot in Yellowstone during peak season. And at first they told me, oh, there's no way. You never do that. And I just kept at them because I said, it's me and 2 other people, really. That's it, and think about it's Disney's Lion King. Think about what this is going to do for tourism in the park once it comes out, for you to be able to say that you collaborated with us. So we finally convinced them, and sure enough, it was me and 2 other guys, and we had a great time. We'd get up really early in the morning, and we'd find a buffalo standing in our way. We'd say to the ranger, how do we get around it? The ranger would say, you wait. And so I always was joking how the production report would look if we were writing one, about how we had to stop for so many things in nature while we were out there working. But it was great. It was that whole thing with the hyenas in the movie, and it was really a fun thing to scout on. And so the great thing about plate shots is really you can go, and also recently I was scouting for Shang-Chi, the new Marvel thing that's happening in North Vietnam. And again, you can go, North Vietnam, you don't have very much choice of hotels. Mm-hmm. There just aren't many in most areas. Mm-hmm. And so you don't need to worry about airports or motels or anything, because you again have such a small footprint that it's easier to get fewer people into more dramatic locations. So I love doing plate shots.
Do you prepare for scouting for plates differently than you prepare for scouting anything else? How do you approach it differently than you would going out looking for any standard location? Or is there a difference?
Well, yeah, because it's a plate shot, it's the wider thing. So in that case, the details don't really matter, and yet the details do matter, because you want to be able to have the right flora and fauna for the set decorators to put in the foreground around the actors when the plate shot is behind them. So it's basically exactly the same thing. Mm-hmm. You are focusing on the bigger picture, because that's what you're literally scouting for, is the bigger picture, but you still need to bring all of those evocative elements to play also.
Mm-hmm. I guess we could talk a little bit about gear too while we're at it. What do you have a preference? Do you care about? Are you brand loyal? Do you shoot Canon, Nikon, Fuji? What's your go-to?
I shoot Nikon, and I shoot Nikon because it's what my brothers had when I was working in their darkroom when I was 11 or 12. Mm-hmm. It's just what I know, and so it's what my lenses were, and I don't think that there's any reason other than that it was what I knew and what I had, and there was no reason not to keep it. It was doing a great job, so I'm still an Nikon person. Although I'm hearing that the Sony system is pretty great because it's so lightweight.
Yeah, and a lot of people are looking more and more at the mirrorless systems, Fuji and others, for that reason. They are lighter. You don't have the bigger body. They're a little more compact. What's your go-to lens? Do you have one lens, or is there one lens?
I do. I have one lens. It's an 18-400, and it is so much smarter than I am. And it's great. It's all I need. It's really great. And I had an 18-300, and it met its demise, and I had to get a new one, and I was so happy that it happened, because the new one gives me more and it's much lighter.
I have to ask, what happened to the 18-300?
I will not tell you that story.
Oh, come on.
It involves leaving a klutz and a pond in the Arboretum in San Diego, by the Balboa Pavilion. Okay. That's as far as I'll go.
I feel like there's so much more to the story that I wish I could get you to tell it. But
embarrassing scout moments, yeah.
Sure, okay. Well, before we totally wrap up, I do want to ask, what your thoughts are on how things might change in the new COVID environment. When you go back to work, you start scouting again, how are you going to approach things differently? What is the impact you think that this will have on how we work and how you work specifically?
Well, I actually just got a call today from somebody seeing if I was interested in working. So I'm hoping that works out. Last week I had a call that already went away. The group that I was scouting for before COVID hit, which is Damien Chazelle's movie Babylon, and every question that I had about the Scout led to 5 more questions instead of answers. Everyone was going to drive themselves, but then what were we going to do for lunch? How was I going to know where bathrooms were that were, because we were driving all over it. It was a 2-week Scout, and they decided to postpone the whole thing, which was a big relief for me. But as you say, it's different for every movie, and I originally was on all of these chat groups and email chains about, working in a COVID world, and I got off all of them because they just made me unsettled. They added to my stress level. Everybody was, yammering like they knew what was going to happen, and I realized none of you know what's going to happen because it's such a fluid situation. It could take a nosedive in any direction, and we're just going to have to adapt to it. So to me, that's the bottom line. Is that's what we do for a living. We adapt, and we'll figure it out. Assuming that movies are going to continue to be made, we'll figure out a way to make them. I must say, I'm very happy to be at this end of my career as opposed to at the beginning of my career, and I'm very grateful to have gotten in all of the international travel that I've gotten in, because that's my big fear now, is that if we'll have to be quarantined before we can go anywhere for 2 weeks, who's going to hire me to travel internationally? So I'm kind of hoping that gets worked out. But we'll see what happens.
When you've been having these conversations, was there any discussion about different ways to approach the locations you were looking for as far as the size or scale?
Everything that I know that's been shooting is based both either at one location or is on a studio somewhere.
Right.
So it might be somewhere, but it's nothing that I've heard of where people are actually going out and looking at locations like the way we used to look at locations. So there have not been any edicts like that yet, because the situation, I don't think, has arisen. And I think, again, we just have to play it by ear. We have to look at the script, and we have to think intelligently how we can tell the story and be safe at the same time.
Right. Well, Laurie, thanks again for making time to have a conversation with me about some of these things and to kind of talk about your career and your experiences. If you were to tell people where to learn more about location managers and what we do and whatnot, where would you send them?
I would recommend, if anyone is interested in finding out more, that they go to locationmanagers.org, which is the site for the Location Managers Guild International. And in addition to having your podcasts up there, which we're in the process of doing, we also have back issues of the Compass magazine, which I'm the co-editor of. And that's been around for 7 years, and it really gives you a good look at who we are and what we do. So it's really been a pleasure. Thanks, Todd.
Oh, it's been great. And I do encourage people to go back and look at the Compass magazine. I really, the most recent issue, there was a profile of Maida Morgan, who I started working with here in Atlanta. It was really great. Nicely done, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. So check those out.
Thanks so much. Maida, tell me that story about Steve McQueen, my God, about 20 years ago. And I've always been after her. It's like, we got to get, that is such a great story. So I'm just so pleased that it's finally a story that's been told, because it really is lovely.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I really thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. So thanks and take care.
Oh, 100%. Thanks. Yeah.
And thank you again for joining us for this episode of Locations on 2. My name is Dodd Vickers, and you can find me online at doddvickers.com. Locations on 2 is available at locationson2.com and anywhere you get your favorite podcasts. For more information on the Location Managers Guild, visit them online at locationmanagers.org. Until next time, I'm back to one.